What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors walks into a morning chat show, expecting warmth, and instead finds himself blindsided by one of the most shocking ambushes of his career? In less than a minute, one host's cutting remarks would destroy years of professional courtesy, ignite national outrage, and leave Colin Firth, the embodiment of British grace, walking off set in stunned disbelief. This is the story of how Carol McGiffin turned what should have been a simple, promotional interview into live television carnage that left viewers speechless and producers scrambling. It began innocently enough. Colin Firth, immaculate in his trademark dark suit, stepped onto the Loose Women set with that gentle, modest smile audiences had loved for decades. Across from him, the panel of hosts waited. Ruth Langsford in her poised, professional center seat, Nadia Sawalha radiating genuine excitement, Jane Moore ready with her notes, and Carol McGiffin sitting far left, arms folded, wearing a knowing smirk. "Welcome back to Loose Women," Ruth began warmly. "We're absolutely thrilled to have Colin Firth with us today. Colin, thank you so much for joining us." "Thank you for having me, Ruth," Colin replied, settling in. "It's lovely to be here." Nadia leaned forward, eager. "You're here to talk about your new film. And I just have to say, I've watched your work for years. You always pick such complex, thoughtful roles. What draws you to those characters?" Colin's expression softened, clearly at ease. "I suppose it's the exploration of the human condition that interests me most. Whether it's playing Mr. Darcy or someone more contemporary, I'm drawn to roles with depth, with moral conflict, with a bit of truth in them." Jane smiled. "And that's what makes your performances feel so authentic. They're lived in." But Carol shifted. The easy flow of conversation faltered as she leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Speaking of authentic," she began, her tone slicing through the calm, "I have to ask you something that's been bothering me, Colin." Ruth's polite smile faltered. "Carol, we agreed on the topics, remember?" "Oh, come on, Ruth," Carol said, waving her hand. "Our viewers deserve honesty, not another polished PR chat." The mood in the studio changed instantly. Colin's smile froze, though he stayed composed. "I'm sorry. What exactly is it that's bothering you?" Carol's gaze hardened. "Well, it's just that actors like you, these posh British types, you all act so noble and artistic. But really, you're just privileged men playing dress-up for millions of pounds." Silence. Nadia's eyes widened. Jane's pen stopped mid-sentence. Ruth looked mortified. Colin blinked slowly, processing. "I'm not sure I follow." "Oh, I think you do," Carol pressed. "You went to fancy schools, had every advantage, and now you sit here talking about the human condition. Like you've ever faced a real struggle in your pampered life." "Carol," Nadia interjected quickly. "That's not fair." "Fair," Carol snapped. "What's not fair is pretending these people are special when they've never worked a real day in their lives." Colin's jaw tightened, his tone steady but edged with quiet steel. "I think you might be making some assumptions about my life that aren't quite accurate." Carol laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Oh, spare us the humble act. You're Colin Firth. You've probably never even been on a bus." Ruth tried to step in, desperate to steady the ship. "Perhaps we could bring it back to the film." But Carol cut her off, eyes flashing. "No, I think the audience would rather hear Colin explain why he deserves those obscene paychecks for pretending to be other people." Colin's composure began to crack. His hands, once relaxed on the armrests, tightened. "I've never claimed to deserve anything more than anyone else," he said evenly. "I work hard at my craft. I take it seriously." "Your craft?" Carol repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. And that single mocking word marked the moment everything truly fell apart. "Listen to yourself," Carol sneered. "It's not brain surgery, Colin. You read lines someone else wrote while someone else points a camera at you. My hairdresser works harder than you do, Jane finally snapped. Carol, that's completely inappropriate. Colin is our guest. And as our guest? Carol shot back. He should be prepared to answer real questions, instead of having everyone fawn over him like he's royalty. Colin leaned forward, his famous composure starting to crack. I came here to talk about a project I'm passionate about, not to be lectured about class warfare by someone who's already decided who I am without knowing a thing about my actual life or background. Carol's eyes glittered with satisfaction. She'd finally drawn blood. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. The real Colin Firth is starting to show through that polite facade. Carol, please! Nadia pleaded, horrified. Can we just move on? But Carol was only warming up. She leaned back, folded her arms, and prepared her final blow. You know what I find most offensive about actors like you? She began, her voice rising, gaining speed like a train without brakes. You take roles away from working-class actors who actually understand, struggle, who've lived real lives, and then you have the audacity to play characters that are supposed to represent ordinary people. Colin's face went perfectly still, but his eyes flared with anger. That's an interesting perspective, Carol, he said tightly. But I think you're oversimplifying how casting actually works. Am I? Carol pressed, her tone dripping with mock innocence. Because last I checked, when directors want someone to play a struggling father or a man facing hardship, they don't go to the local job center. They call you someone who's never missed a meal or worried about rent. Ruth was frantically gesturing to the control room to cut to commercial, but Carol was unstoppable now. And the worst part, she continued, is how you all pretend it's some noble calling. At least footballers are honest about being overpaid entertainers. You lot act like you're performing some great public service. Colin sat up straight, his voice rising for the first time. You know what, Carol? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am privileged. I'm privileged to do work I love, with people who care deeply about their craft. But what I find offensive is your assumption that privilege somehow disqualifies someone from telling meaningful stories. Maybe we should all just take a breath, Nadia said softly, trying to diffuse the tension. No, Colin said sharply, his patience finally gone. I've listened politely while you attacked my background, my profession, and my integrity, but I won't sit here while you belittle the work that thousands of dedicated people put into creating something that means something to others. Carol smirked, savoring the chaos. Oh, here we go. The poor little rich boy gets upset because someone dared to question his importance. Colin leaned forward, his tone cutting through the room. I'm upset because you invited me here under false pretenses. I was told this would be a conversation about my work, not a soapbox for your personal resentment about class and success. Carol laughed, sharp and humorless. Personal resentment? I'm speaking for millions of people who are sick of being told that what you do matters more than what they do. Jane turned to her, finally losing patience. Carol, you're being deliberately confrontational. This isn't what we agreed before the show. Oh, don't be so precious, Jane, Carol snapped. Real television happens when someone finally asks the questions everyone else is too polite to ask. Colin's voice dropped to a deadly calm, quieter but far more dangerous. And what question exactly is that, Carol? Because so far, all I've heard are accusations and assumptions. Carol leaned forward, sensing her moment. All right then, here's my question. She paused, savoring the silence. How do you justify taking millions of pounds to play pretend while nurses and teachers struggle to pay their mortgages? The air vanished from the studio. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Colin stared at her, his expression a mix of disbelief, anger, and something colder, pity. When he finally spoke, his voice was precise, every syllable deliberate. That question, he said, reveals everything anyone needs to know about your understanding of how the world works. You seem to believe success is a zero-sum game, that my work somehow takes something away from nurses and teachers. That's not how economics works, Carol. That's not how anything works. Carol's smirk faltered, but she pressed on. Don't lecture me about economics, Colin. I know what I see. What you see, Colin replied, his voice growing stronger, is what you choose to see. You've taken your anger about inequality, which, by the way, is a legitimate issue, and turned it into a weapon to attack individuals, as if tearing people down on live television is going to fix systemic problems. Perhaps, Ruth began, her voice trembling slightly. We could bring the discussion back to how the film industry supports the economy. No, Ruth, Colin said, not breaking his stare from Carol. She asked a question. Let's give her a full answer. He turned fully toward Carol now, posture straight, eyes unblinking, the energy in the room shifting as he took control. You want to know how I justify my career, he said, his voice firm, resonant. I don't have to. I work in a legal profession. I pay my taxes. I employ people. I support charities. And I choose projects that say something meaningful. About humanity, empathy, and yes, privilege. He paused, his tone cooling into something almost sorrowful. What I don't do is sit behind a desk, tearing others down to feel powerful. That's not honesty, Carol. That's bitterness dressed up as journalism. But more importantly, Carol, Colin continued, his tone low but unwavering, I don't spend my time attacking people I've never met, based on shallow assumptions about their lives and backgrounds. Carol's face flushed crimson. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? No, Colin replied, his voice calm, devastatingly calm. But I'm certainly better than someone who uses their platform to bully guests who came here in good faith. The word bully hit like a slap. Carol's expression froze, then drained of color. Nadia gasped. Jane's pen clattered from her hand. Ruth looked as though she wanted to vanish into her seat. How dare you call me a bully? Carol snapped, her voice pitching higher. I'm asking legitimate questions that represent the concerns of ordinary people. Colin gave a short, mirthless laugh. Ordinary people? Carol, you're sitting on national television, attacking someone's character and background for sport. If that isn't bullying, what exactly would you call it? The silence was suffocating. Carol opened her mouth, closed it again, floundering. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight, almost trembling. At least I'm honest about what I am. I don't pretend to be some sort of artist while I count my money. That was the moment everything shifted. Colin's face went utterly still. When he spoke again, it was so quiet the entire studio leaned in to hear. Honest about what you are? He repeated. Carol, what you've just shown everyone watching is exactly why civil discourse in this country is dying. Carol tried to cut in, but Colin raised a hand, not angrily, but with such quiet authority that she stopped mid-breath. You invited me here as a guest, he said. I came in good faith, ready to talk about a piece of work that dozens of people poured their hearts into. Instead, you've used this platform to launch personal attacks based on nothing but your own prejudice and resentment. His voice rose, not in volume, but in force. Every word landed like a verdict. You've made assumptions about my background, my values, my profession, all without knowing anything about me. You've dismissed an entire field of work as meaningless, suggested that success itself is immoral, and when challenged, you've doubled down on contempt. No one moved. Nadia sat frozen, her eyes wide. Jane's notepad lay forgotten on the desk. Ruth stared helplessly at the floor, clearly wishing she could end the broadcast. Colin rose from his chair, his full height commanding the space. The atmosphere shifted instantly. But what's most disappointing, Carol, he said, his tone soft but unrelenting, is that you seem to think this kind of behavior makes you brave. That attacking a guest somehow makes you a champion for ordinary people. It doesn't. It just makes you cruel, Carol's voice cracked. I'm not cruel. I'm honest. Someone has to ask the difficult questions. Colin looked down at her, his gaze sharp with quiet disdain. These aren't difficult questions, Carol. A difficult question takes thought, research, genuine curiosity. What you've done here isn't journalism. It's lazy. It's mean-spirited. And frankly, it's embarrassing. He stepped toward the edge of the set, the camera still rolling. Where do you think you're going? Carol demanded, her tone now openly panicked. We're not finished here. Colin turned back, his expression unreadable. Yes, Carol, we absolutely are finished here. Colin, please. Ruth tried, her voice shaking. I'm sure Carol didn't mean... Oh, she meant every word. Colin cut in sharply. The only question is whether your network intends to hold her accountable for turning your show into a platform for personal attacks. Carol lurched to her feet, trembling with rage. You can't just walk out. This is live television. Colin's reply came with the kind of controlled precision that silenced the room. Carol, I've spent my entire career working with professionals, directors, actors, crew members, who understand that respect is not optional. Even when you disagree, you treat people with dignity. What you've done here isn't disagreement. It isn't journalism. It's just unpleasant. He lifted his jacket from the back of his chair and straightened it calmly. I came here to talk about a project that people worked incredibly hard to bring to life, he said. Instead, I've been subjected to a lecture on class resentment from someone who mistakes hostility for insight. Carol's hands were shaking now, her face a storm of anger and humiliation. You think you're so much better than everyone else? She hissed. Colin paused mid-motion, his gaze freezing her in place. No, Carol, he said quietly. I think I'm better than this conversation. And frankly, so should you. He slipped on his jacket, turned toward the rest of the panel. Jane's voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. Colin, I'm so sorry for all of this. Colin looked at her, his expression softening for the first time. Jane, you have nothing to apologize for. Neither do you, Nadia. Or you, Ruth. He glanced once more toward Carol, his final words deliberate and icy. The tragedy, Carol, isn't that you tried to humiliate me. It's that you don't even realize you've humiliated yourself. Nadia nodded gratefully, tears actually visible in her eyes. We're mortified this happened. Professional disagreement is fine, Colin said, adjusting his jacket collar with the kind of deliberate precision that suggested barely controlled fury. Challenging questions are welcome. But what happened here was neither professional nor challenging. He paused, his gaze hardening. It was just ugly. Carol made one final trembling attempt to claw back authority. So that's it? She said, voice cracking. You're just going to run away because someone dared to question your precious career? Colin stopped at the edge of the set, the studio lights reflecting off his calm, resolute expression. When he turned to face her again, there was no anger left, only quiet, unshakable conviction. I'm not running away from your questions, Carol, he said evenly. I'm walking away from your behavior. He turned toward the camera, his tone shifting once more to that familiar, articulate warmth that had defined his career for decades. To anyone watching who was hoping to hear about the film, he began, I apologize that didn't happen today. The cast and crew put tremendous effort into creating something worthwhile, and they deserve far better representation than this. Then he looked back at Carol, his voice firm but almost mournful. And to anyone who thinks this kind of ambush interviewing represents good television or legitimate journalism, he said, his words echoing in the hushed studio, I'd suggest you reconsider what you actually accomplished here. And with that, Colin Firth walked off the Loose Women set. The camera lingered for a moment on his retreating figure. The measured stride, the quiet dignity, before cutting awkwardly back to the panel, in complete disarray. Ruth sat frozen, head bowed, whispering something to the producers off-screen. Nadia wiped her face, her composure shattered. Jane stared down at her notepad, as though trying to disappear into it. Carol McGiffin, the woman who had moments ago been smirking with confidence, now stood motionless. Her face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Shock, defiance, disbelief, and finally the slow, creeping awareness of what she'd just done. The studio was utterly silent. No one dared speak. The only sound was the fading echo of Colin Firth's footsteps, disappearing down the corridor. A quiet, rhythmic reminder of everything that had just imploded. Within hours, the clip would be everywhere. Headlines would describe it as the interview that ended a career, a live TV disaster, and the moment Colin Firth redefined dignity. But inside that studio, in those heavy seconds after he left, it felt like something deeper had broken. Not just a segment, not just a reputation, but the very illusion that cruelty makes good television. And that, in the end, was what everyone would remember.